Okay, so have you ever felt just completely swamped by news? Information overload, especially when something big is happening, like a crisis.
Oh, absolutely. You're trying to figure out what's really going on
Yeah, looking for that one clear answer, right? And instead, it's just conflicting messages everywhere.
from every direction. It can feel like you're buried under this avalanche of data.
Exactly. And you're left wondering, okay, what can I actually trust here?
Well, it's a very common feeling.
Yeah.
And that sense of overwhelm, of not knowing where to turn for reliable guidance, there's actually a specific term for it.
Right. And that term is infodemic, which is, wow, it's a pretty interesting word when you break it down.
It is. Basically, an infodemic means an overabundance of information. And here's the key part. Some of that info is accurate, sure, but a lot of it isn't.
And that massive flood makes it incredibly difficult for people, for you, to find trustworthy sources when you really need them during an epidemic or really any crisis.
Yeah, and what's really insightful, I think, is how the word itself blends information and epidemic.
Hmm.
It highlights this really critical parallel. Just like a biological virus, bad information, whether it's misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, can spread incredibly fast.
Like wildfire.
Exactly. And it confuses people, undermines effective responses. The real kicker isn't just the volume. It's how this rapid spread can almost create this perverse sense of certainty in stuff that's totally wrong.
Because you can always find something online that confirms what you already think or fear.
Precisely, no matter how inaccurate it might be.
So, okay, for this deep dive, our mission is pretty clear. We're going to really dig into what an infodemic actually is.
We'll look at where the term came from, its origin story, if you like.
Explore its key characteristics, its real-world impact, which is significant.
Definitely. And maybe most importantly, we'll uncover some of the surprising strategies and frameworks people have developed to manage it.
Giving you some practical ways to navigate this whole complex landscape.
So you mentioned earlier, it's more nuanced than just lumping everything together as fake news.
Right. What are those specific distinctions, the ones that really define an infodemic?
That's a great point because, yeah, it's vital to get the differences. We're not just talking about outright lies. We usually break it down into three main types.
Okay.
First, you've got misinformation. This is basically false or inaccurate information, but it's usually shared without any malicious intent.
So, like, someone genuinely shares an old news story thinking it's current, or just gets a fact wrong.
Exactly. They're not trying to trick you. They're just mistaken.
Okay. And then we get to disinformation. Sounds similar, but I guess the intent changes here.
That's the key difference.
Yeah.
Yes. Disinformation is deliberately misleading. There's a clear intention behind it, often malicious.
Like a coordinated campaign to spread a lie, maybe? To manipulate opinion?
Precisely. Or to cause harm, so discord. The intent to deceive is central.
And the third one, malinformation. That one sounds a bit trickier.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because malinformation uses information that's actually true.
Oh, okay. How does that work then?
Well, it's taken out of context. Or it's exaggerated. Or it's presented in a way specifically designed to mislead or cause harm. Imagine a true statistic being cherry-picked from a report.
Ah, and presented without any of the surrounding context that explains it.
Right. Stripping away all the nuance to just incite fear or anger. So all three of these mis, dis, and malinformation, they all contribute to that overabundance. Defining an infodemic makes it incredibly hard to see clearly.
So where did this term infodemic actually come from? I think most people, probably including me until recently, associate it straight with COVID-19. Was that really its origin?
That's a really common thought, but nope, it actually goes back quite a bit further. It was first coined way back in 2003.
2003, wow.
By who? By a foreign policy expert named David Rothkopf. He used it in a Washington Post article during the SARS outbreak that happened between 2002 and 2004.
So even back with SARS, he was seeing this information epidemic happening alongside the actual virus. What did he say about its impact then?
He described how it essentially transformed what was a regional health crisis into, and this was his word, a global debacle.
A debacle, wow.
Yeah, with major economic and social fallout that went way beyond just the health issues. So it shows this early recognition of how the whole information environment could either help or, really hinder a public health response.
But it didn't really catch on widely back then.
Not in the same way. It really gained widespread recognition, became much more prominent during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. That's when the World Health Organization, the WHO.
Right, that's when we all started hearing it constantly.
Exactly. The WHO officially recognized the infodemic as a major challenge in managing the crisis. They highlighted how this rapid spread of both true and false information, especially through social media, created huge problems for health authorities worldwide.
Okay, so given that history, what are the defining features? What makes an infodemic so potent, especially now?
Well, one of the most obvious things is just the sheer overabundance of information.
Just the volume.
The sheer volume,
Yeah.
online, offline.
Yeah.
It's so vast it becomes incredibly hard to tell reliable sources from unreliable ones.
Yeah.
It's not just that there's a lot, it's that the noise makes it hard to even know where to begin looking for solid answers.
You get exhausted before you even start, almost.
Right. Information fatigue is real.
And it's not just the amount, it's the speed, isn't it? That rapid dissemination feels critical.
Absolutely critical. Modern tech, especially social media, lets information just explode across borders, across populations, almost instantly.
A tweet, a post can reach millions in minutes.
Exactly, which makes trying to contain bad information incredibly difficult. That speed just fundamentally changes how we consume news and how quickly narratives, true or false, can grab hold.
And I think we've all felt this, the emotional and psychological impact. Constantly seeing conflicting information, scary headlines, it naturally creates fear, anxiety, uncertainty.
And what experts call decision fatigue. You just get worn out trying to figure out what to believe or do.
It's easy to see how overwhelming that is.
Yeah.
But what's the long-term cost for society? I mean, operating under that kind of constant informational stress.
Oh, the long-term cost is huge.
Yeah.
And that brings us to why this really matters to you listening right now. This isn't just some abstract idea.
Right, there are real consequences.
Very real, tangible consequences for public health, for society. One huge impact is undermining public health responses.
How so?
Well, if misinformation leads people to ignore health guidelines, think mask wearing, vaccinations during a pandemic.
Then the disease spreads more easily.
Exactly. It directly increases transmission, potentially overwhelms hospitals. It has direct physical consequences.
And I imagine that ties into trust as well.
Massively. That's another huge consequence, the erosion of trust. When false information gets amplified, it really damages public faith in health authorities, in scientists, and institutions generally.
And once that trust is gone,
It's incredibly hard to get people to follow vital public health measures. Even if the guidance is sound, if people don't trust the source, they won't listen.
we also see significant mental health effects, right?
Definitely. That constant barrage of conflicting, often alarming information causes real stress, confusion, that decision fatigue we talked about.
And it probably hits some people harder than others.
For sure. It's particularly tough for vulnerable groups. Maybe pregnant women worried about risks, or people with pre-existing mental health conditions. The anxiety generated by an infodemic can be really intense for them.
We saw this so clearly during COVID-19, didn't we? False claims were just everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Conspiracy theories about where the virus came from, totally ineffective home remedies being pushed.
Yeah, and all the misleading stuff about masks, about vaccines.
It created so much confusion, so much hesitancy, and that directly undermined the advice public health officials are trying to give.
And it's not just about new crises, is it? Think about vaccine hesitancy more broadly.
That's a perfect example of a long-term infodemic. The anti-vaccine movement has been fueled for years by this stuff, especially spreading on platforms like Facebook.
With false claims about safety being shared over and over.
Exactly. It shows how these damaging narratives stick around, impacting public health long after an immediate crisis has passed. It's a persistent problem.
Okay, so the big question then, what can we actually do about it? How do we fight back against this infodemic?
Right, let's talk solutions, countermeasures. The WHO focuses on what they call infodemic management.
Infodemic management, okay. So what does that involve? Both for us as individuals and, more broadly.
Let's start with the individual actions, things you can do right now. The most basic, but maybe most important, is to verify information before you share it.
Pause before you hit share or retweet.
Exactly. Do a quick check. Where did this come from? Is the source credible? Also, really try to rely on trusted sources.
Like the WHO itself, national health bodies, maybe peer-reviewed research if you can access it.
Yes. And cross-reference. If only one obscure website is reporting something sensational, be skeptical. Look for confirmation from reputable places.
And maybe sometimes the best thing is just stepping away.
Absolutely. Taking breaks from the news cycle is crucial. Avoid that information overload. You don't need to be plugged in 247.
Okay, but here's something really interesting I read about. Pre-bunking. Can you explain that? It sounds different from just fact-checking after the fact.
Pre-bunking is a really cool strategy, and it's gaining ground. The idea is to proactively warn people in advance about potential misinformation they might encounter.
So you kind of inoculate them against it.
That's exactly the analogy people use, like an informational vaccine. You build their resilience before they see the false claims, making them less likely to fall for manipulation.
Which is different from debunking.
Right. Debunking is correcting false claims after they're already out there, already spreading, potentially already causing harm. Pre-bunking tries to get ahead of it, stop the spread before it even starts.
That seems really powerful, potentially.
It could be. It's about building mental antibodies, so to speak.
Okay, so beyond what we can do individually, what about the bigger picture? Those broader, multifaceted approaches.
Well, on a larger scale, things like information monitoring, sometimes called infovalence, are key.
Tracking the spread, like disease surveillance.
Kind of like that, yeah. Tracking and analyzing how information is flowing to spot misinformation trends early. Another huge area is promoting media literacy.
Teaching people how to evaluate sources critically.
Exactly. How to spot biases, recognize common disinformation tricks, making the public more savvy consumers of information. Then, of course, you still need active fact-checking and debunking. Correcting the record is still important.
And what about the platforms, social media companies?
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. There's ongoing debate and action around policy and regulation. How do we hold platforms accountable for the harmful stuff spreading on their sites?
That's a thorny one.
It is. It also involves things like developing legal frameworks, running public awareness campaigns, improving the quality of health content in mass media, and boosting digital and health literacy across the board.
Any futuristic stuff on the horizon, like AI?
Yeah, there's research looking into computer-driven measures. Think advanced AI algorithms that could potentially identify emerging misinformation patterns even faster than humans.
Or maybe even help flag or contextualize potentially harmful content automatically.
Potentially, yes. Though that comes with its own set of challenges and ethical questions, of course.
So to help organize all these different approaches, there's this framework, right? The 4I Framework for Advancing Communication and Trust, or 4I FAC-CT.
Yes, it's a useful model. It breaks down interventions into 4 distinct levels, providing a kind of roadmap for a coordinated response.
Okay, what are the 4 levels?
The first is informational. This is about the content itself, actively amplifying accurate, factual information.
Filling those information voids where misinformation might creep in?
Exactly. And of course, debunking false claims, making sure good information is out there and easy to find.
Got it. What's next?
The second level is individual. This connects back to what we were just saying.
Enhancing media literacy using pre-bunking.
Precisely. Building that personal resilience against misinformation. Empowering each person to be more discerning.
Makes sense. The third level.
Interpersonal community. This recognizes that we often trust people we know.
So engaging local leaders, community health workers.
Yes, trusted local voices disseminating accurate information within their own networks, using those existing relationships and community connections to share good info.
That seems really important, tapping into local trust.
It's crucial. And finally, the fourth level is institutional.
Okay, this sounds like the big systemic stuff.
It is. This is where you get into regulating social media platforms, maybe managing how academic research is shared to ensure accuracy, developing those broader policies to tackle misinformation systemically.
So building a more robust system from the top down to counter the infodemic.
That's the idea. It needs action at all 4 levels to be really effective.
Now, we absolutely have to talk more about social media's role here. It's complex, isn't it? And incredibly influential.
Hugely influential. Platforms like TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, they play such a significant role in how information spreads during these events, for better and for worse.
And studying them presents its own challenges, right? Like accessing data.
Definitely. The accessibility of data varies a lot. You mentioned TikTok's research API earlier. Limiting access mainly to nonprofits in the US or Europe can make it harder for independent researchers everywhere to really understand the dynamics on that specific platform.
And the research that is out there suggests some interesting differences between platforms.
It does. For example, some studies suggest users on, say, Twitter or Instagram might be a bit less susceptible to iffy sources compared to maybe other platforms. It's complex, though.
But info from established news outlets seems to spread similarly everywhere, regardless of the outlet's own reliability.
That seems to be the case, interestingly. What really seems to drive the spread, both of good info and bad info, are things like the specific interaction patterns on each platform.
Like how easy it is to share, the algorithms pushing content.
Exactly. The algorithms, the specific audiences on each platform, how they behave. A platform built for short, viral videos will spread things differently than one focused on longer text posts or tight-knit groups.
And one really concerning finding from some research is that, well, what we often call fake news or inaccurate information might actually spread faster and wider than fact-based news.
Yeah, that's a finding that gets a lot of attention, potentially driven by novelty or emotional triggers, amplified by those platform dynamics. It feels like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle.
It really does. And you mentioned this earlier, but the term fake news itself can be problematic.
It really can be. It gets used so often in political debates just to label opposing views as unreliable, whether they are or not.
Which muddies the water when you're trying to address genuine misinformation.
Totally. It makes it super important to study how these social media environments actually shape our perception of polarizing topics, like COVID-19 info. It's not just about what content is there, but how the platform itself influences how we understand it, how we react to it.
Okay, so wrapping this all together, an infodemic is, well, it's clearly this really complex beast. High volume, rapid spread, a mix of good and bad information.
And managing it really requires everyone pulling together. Governments, platforms, health organizations, researchers.
And individuals, active participation from you.
Absolutely. Remember the power you have. Verifying before sharing, relying on trusted sources, taking those breaks when you need them, understanding concepts like pre-bunking.
These are just abstract ideas, they're practical tools.
Powerful tools you can use every day to navigate this landscape and, honestly, contribute to making the whole information environment a bit healthier for everyone.